but definitely for insert shots. What's up? We are back with a rig guide, as I promised, because I've been hinting at a rig guide, but I needed another camera. So now I have 3 cameras. I've got that camera, this camera. So we got lots of cameras now. Anyway, so I just wanted to do a kind of a quick rig guide. I noticed there wasn't a lot of Fujifilm X-T4 rig guides out there. There are a couple which inspired this build. And so I figured I would do my own. So let's get started. First of all, you obviously need your camera, Fujifilm X-T4 preferably. The reason why this is particular to an X-T4 and maybe not like a T3 or a T2 is because the X-T4 uses a new Fujifilm battery, which weirdly enough doesn't really have a lot of dummy battery options, which kind of plays a big role into how the rig goes together, period. So just wanted to keep that in mind. However, in general, like if you have an X-T3 or an X-T2, like this would probably still work more or less. You just have more power options. Anyway, so X-T4 with your favorite lens. I have the Siri anamorphic lens on mine. So if you haven't seen that video, you should check that out. Very cool lens, perfect for a cinema rig because it doesn't have autofocus. So you can see I have a focus band already put on there. So cool. All right, so the first thing we've got is a small rig cage. And of course, I'll link all of the bits and pieces that I'm using below. So I have an X-T4 cage from Small Rig, pretty solid. I have a couple things mounted to it already. I have the cable clamp, which I highly recommend in order to kind of make sure your HDMI cable and the power cable stay nice and snug, as well as the Tilta Nucleus Nano wheel mount is on here as well. And then I have 2 NATO rails. I have a regular long NATO rail, which again, I'll try to link everything below so you can make sure that everything fits. But I have a tall NATO rail up top, and then I have a low profile NATO rail on the side. In terms of whether that matters or not, it doesn't really matter if you get a low profile or a regular one. It's just really kind of up to you. The low profile ones obviously are a little nicer. But yeah, so the important thing with putting the cage on is that you have to make sure that the door, the little flappy bit here, I don't know if you can get that, the little flappy bit on the side with the HDMI and the USB-C, you need to make sure that that's flipped open. You can see mine's pretty used to being there. It won't damage it. I would just make sure that you take it and flip the plastic piece inside of the other plastic housing and then push it flat. That way you're not putting too much stress on the rubber, so that when you do take it out of the cage again, you can still seal it up so you don't lose your weather sealing. I'm sure you could cut this off or like remove it if you wanted to, but I don't really want to do that, so that's what we're gonna do. Oh, and another note, if you have these little Peak Design bits, or you have just in general, you have any of these little hanging things, you can keep them on. A lot of people recommend removing them because they do get in the way when you put the cage and everything on, so it makes it tough to get to your SD cards and whatnot. I keep mine on because I don't record to the SD cards when I do video anyway, but just keep that in mind. If you do record to your SD cards, you might want to remove these little things. All right, so putting the cage on is about as easy as you would expect. You just kind of stick it in there. And then, like I said, the important thing is to get that little flappy bit. This is really hard to show, but you want to make sure the flap is like bent outward so that when you put the cage on, it like stays open. It's a little complicated, but if you get it, it should look a little bit like that. So I don't know if cameraman over there can get kind of a close-up on that. So you can see now the ports are like always open. That's probably the hardest part about putting this whole thing together, is just getting that little plastic bit to stay open while you put the cage on. And that's, again, that's only if you're using the cable clamp. So if you choose not to use the cable clamp, then you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so the cool thing about the cage that I do like is that it comes with a little thumb screw tab thing on the bottom. So you don't have to use a quarter or anything like that. It's nice that it magnetizes right underneath the cage. And that was kind of a cool little thing. So there you go. So now you got your camera just in the rig, or in the cage all by itself, which is a pretty handy dandy tool. You can still take photos with it in this form or whatnot. The next thing is this sort of base plate situation I've got over here. Now I'm not gonna take the whole thing apart just because I don't really think I need to. Essentially it's one long Manfrotto plate as the base. And then I have the Small Rig 15mm rod base plate on top of that. And then on top of that is I think it's a Camvate Manfrotto mount plate on top of all that. And then on the back, this was a pretty cool thing that I saw, is actually a small rig phone mount. And that's what's going to hold our Anker power bank on the back of our rig. And then the rod that I have is actually just the rod that came with the tilted Nucleus Nano. So that's kind of the full base, as I like to call it. It's removable from the cage for a reason, so that I can put it on the gimbal without putting this whole thing on the gimbal. So speaking of the gimbal, there is another Manfrotto plate that I use that goes just on the cage itself. So most times I will just have this screwed into there. And then here's another one of my favorite things about the small rig stuff, is that the handle that I have actually comes with a 1/4-20 Allen wrench that goes like up inside the handle. So that's very handy. So when you put your small Manfrotto plate, this is mine for the gimbal. So if you don't have a gimbal or you don't plan on flying on a gimbal, you could probably get away with just mounting the cage directly to the rod plate. But this is assuming you have a gimbal and you want to be able to go on a gimbal or do handheld. So just keep that in mind. I'm just using the Zhiyun Manfrotto plate that came with the gimbal, but you can use any small Manfrotto plate for this. But essentially, most times, like, this is sort of, if I'm switching between handheld, gimbal, and photographs, this is a really chunky build to take pictures with, but it's still manageable. Like, I could still take pictures with it if I wanted to. The other nice thing is that it now sits up on its own, which I don't know if you can see that. So now it'll sit up nice without wobbling and keeps the lens from tipping over. But yeah, so that's kind of this is how it would go on the gimbal using this plate. So the next thing is to take your cage and your one Manfrotto plate and then go ahead and attach it to your full base plate. And that just goes on just like any other Manfrotto plate. So I line mine up just to about the back of the plate and then tighten the screw down on the other side. So here's a one handy dandy tip with all of these kinds of screws like this, even on like gimbals and things. If you're having a tough time rotating it, because like even in this case, the thumb screw will hit the bottom of the cage, you can actually pull up on these and rotate them freely without tightening or loosening the screw. So you can reposition the little thumb bit wherever you need it to get more torque. So if you're having an issue like you can't tighten it because you have some clearance issues, all these screws, you can readjust them. You see how it clicked? And you can kind of adjust where you need it to go. So that's very helpful. So this looks pretty absurd because you got two Manfrotto plates and a rod, but I promise it all makes sense. So now that'll sit up on its own. The next thing would be your Anker power bank. Fujifilm has a list of recommended power banks on their website. This is one of them. Now there are a couple options with mounting the battery. I've seen some people mount the battery in the front here, like this, but I didn't really like the way that the weight felt on that. So I actually decided to mount mine, as you see, to the back. So basically how that works is I stick one side in, pull it, and then there you go. And now you've kind of got this well-balanced, a lot of the weight sits kind of here in the center, depending on what lens you have on, but this battery adds a lot of weight to the back, so it keeps it nice and balanced. I mean, I can almost balance it right in the center there. So pretty good. You want to make sure that your rig's nice and balanced, because when you're hand holding it, you don't want too much weight at the front or the back, vice versa. So that's that. This is my top handle. You can see I've got my cables strapped to it because oftentimes it's either very hard to find really short cables to run from one side to the other, or they're more expensive for some reason. So I usually just will use a bongo tie or rubber band or whatever and just tie all my slack up to the top of my handle here. And then again, everything's NATO railed here, so this will just go on top. We'll tighten that down. Now you've got a nice top handle here, which I feel like all good rigs have nice top handles. And then we can put the side handle on as well. So side handle, same thing, NATO railed, put that on the side here. And we'll tighten that down like that. And now you've got a nice sturdy, you can hold it like that, you can hold it from the top, hold it just from the side, whatever. And then once I get to the focus wheel, you'll see how that can work as well. And then on the front of the handle is where I like to put my monitor. I have an Atomos Ninja 5. You can use whatever monitor here. The Ninja 5 is a great pairing with the X-T4 because it allows you to record in the external 10-bit 422, but not necessary. So that just slides onto there, which, by the way, I know I'm kind of skipping over a couple things. This is just the articulating monitor mount from Small Rig that I have attached to the Ninja. You can get just the standard tilt one, which just tilts in this direction. I have the one that also rotates, just for more flexibility, but you don't have to get that one. I would just make sure that you get one that is NATO rail accessible. Same thing, there's a NATO rail on the front of this top handle, and that just will slide on. So now all the weight from my monitor kind of hangs off the front. So again, see, still pretty balanced. It's not really wanting to tilt one way or the other. And then I've got a nice big Sony NP970 battery here, which will power the Ninja for me. So the only thing on this rig that's not powered by the battery is the Ninja. There are little things that you can get for a Ninja if you're using one that you can plug then into your power bank if you want to. I've just been using the NP batteries because they last a long time. So there you go. I'm gonna go ahead and plug my stuff into the ports. I'll show you how this little thing works. And again, this is kind of an optional accessory. Just kind of helps make sure that your cables never come out. And if you've ever used mini HDMI, or I guess it's micro HDMI, you know how they can be a bit flimsy. So we'll go ahead and plug that in. HDMI cable, this thing is really great. I found it on Amazon. It was inexpensive and it's just the right length for a rig like this. So I'll link that for sure. Same thing, that'll go in there, and then that'll go into there. So you can see a nice cable travel there. I also have a 90-degree USB-C cable so that I can plug this into the battery without too much stress there. And then this other cable up here is for the focus motor, which you need power for, which is why it's important to have a power system on this rig, because if you're using the tilted Nucleus Nano, the motor needs to have power from something. And I'm not sure if you can actually power it from the camera itself, so having a battery is obviously the way to go. When it comes to the focus motor, I would definitely recommend plugging it in before you put it on the rail. Otherwise, you'll have a really hard time plugging your thing in while it's on. So I would just plug it in for that, and then it'll actually automatically power on. I actually made a video about the tilted Nucleus Nano as well. So if you're interested and need a little focus puller, that's a good one to check out. So there we go. Now, put the focus motor on, and we can tighten that down. And the cool thing with having the side handles, it lets you actually tilt the rig just enough so you can actually get up under here and tighten down the focus motor. Okay, final thing is the tilted Nucleus Nano wheel. So we're gonna go put that on the mount that's already on the cage here. And that just slides down. Now, one thing to note about my particular setup, if you're doing exactly what I've done, is that the wheel will not sit all the way down on the mount. It's fine because it's just holding the wheel on, so you don't actually have to seat it all the way, although it's probably recommended. It will fit just fine as long as about more than half of it slides down in there. Again, this is because of the cable mount, so I would definitely recommend this as like a optional accessory because it does create some issues. Like the little plastic door has to be open. This doesn't go all the way down, little things, but it does keep your cable. So that's up to you if you want to add that or not. But yeah, so once you do that, you can power it on. We'll go ahead and power the whole system on here, and then we'll put the Allen key back in, which, like I said, so now you can see nice and sturdy rig here. Allen key will go back up under here, so that way you always have it. And the way I like to hold the camera is I like to just kind of hold it, balance it between the handle and the focus wheel. And as you can see, we're pretty much all set up. So that pretty much does it for the rig. You can see it is pretty versatile. So you can see kind of, you know, it's pretty heavy, but because of its weight, it does make it nice and easy to make some really smooth shots and stuff like that. And I'll probably throw up some B-roll clips that I've taken. If you've seen any of my other videos recently, they've all pretty much been with this kind of rig. And the nice thing too is if you're wondering like, oh, do I still get my cold shoe The cage for the X-T4 does have a cold shoe right here. So you do still have that option. You will not be able to get to the cold shoe on the camera itself because it's covered, but you also, if you get the same handle, most of the handles from SmallRig do have a cold shoe mount on them as well. So you actually have 2 cold shoe mounts in case you still need to attach, say like a ball mount for a light or a monitor arm, which I do have as like an extended part of this rig that I don't use that often. But yeah, that pretty much does it for the rig and everything is good to go. One other cool thing is that you can get to the battery to the camera if you need to. Now you can't get to it while it's all set up like this because this one little thumb screw gets in the way. But if you take the camera off the big base plate, you can get to the battery to replace it. However, that's kind of the whole point of the battery bank. If there's anything, I guess, as a summary for this, make sure your screen is flipped out so you can get to some of your camera controls. Make sure your battery's in the camera because the X-T4 cannot be powered by just battery power. It needs to have a battery in the camera in order for it to be powered externally. So don't forget that. And then, yeah, those are kind of the things to remember. But once you got it all together, you're pretty much set to go. Not only is it more durable and a little bit safer to sit down in places because you got that nice big Manfrotto base plate, it's also heavy enough that you get those nice smooth shots without too much jitter. And yeah, you can still put it on a tripod if you want. That's the other nice thing, is that because we built this on a Manfrotto plate, you can still mount this to a tripod if you needed to. I don't have a second tripod with all that jazz, so I have not done that, but you could. And then, like I said, if you want to go from this to gimbal shooting, you would just that's kind of the key with the NATO rails here. Everything kind of nicely slides off, so that's kind of the whole point of that. Unplug stuff from the batteries here, loosen up our connections. So we take that off. Remember to unplug it from your focus motor, which I have forgotten to do. There we go. Loosen this just enough. Focus motor's gotta come off. So obviously switching between the two is still a bit of a pain, but generally speaking, once you get it to this stage, now you can get your battery out. So your battery is accessible through the cage. And then you can also now put this on a gimbal or use this on a smaller whatever setup. But that's kind of the big components, I guess, is the cage with a single Manfrotto plate for the gimbal. And then you've got your bigger base with the battery and everything on. This is basically like your power system. And then you've got your top handle with your monitor and all that stuff. But because everything's modular, you can actually kind of play around with different setups if you want. You could just directly mount your monitor then to the top here, and that's kind of the beauty, I guess, with these kinds of rigs, is that now you can do that, and then I can put this handle back on if I wanted to, and kind of just, you know. So that's kind of the cool thing with the NATO rails, is that you could configure it any different way you want without having to actually like unscrew anything. If you notice, we only had to use the Allen key for really just like 2 things instead of the entire build. So yeah, I'm gonna sit down now. This is kind of a hodgepodge video, so I apologize. But I just kind of wanted to explain, because I didn't feel like there was enough X-T4 build guides out there. So this is the one that I've been rocking, and it works pretty darn well. But as usual, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I didn't go into enough detail. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys. I can't decide what camera to look at, but I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Peace out. Bye-bye.